Of the meeting. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to peruse them, but if not, I'll give you guys a minute to look them over.
I have questions.
Okay, any questions? Skip.
I do. We certainly talked about changing the minutes of the previous because I had noticed that I had asked questions that during the fiscal oversight meeting that we had, and still waiting on answers. So I'm wondering when we might be getting them.
And unfortunately, Glenn is not here, so I cannot speak for Glenn, but if you want to ask the selectman, he's right there.
I would like to.
Go ahead, Skip.
So the
I'm not
question.
saying I'll have an answer, but go ahead.
Well, I guess that's the reason for my question is when might we be getting answers to the questions I had asked? Because
Which questions, Skip, specifically?
For instance, with both the police and the fire departments, the expenditure for salaries and overtime were far in advance of the time during the season, and neither of you had an answer at that point. So I'm curious as to why.
Well, I spoke to the fire chief, and he wondered where that was coming from, because he's on track for his overtime.
Okay, but what about the regular? Because I noticed that they were. I should have just pulled them out, but I can go back and take a look at the numbers that we had during the meeting, but they were up around well over 70%, and that caught my eye, and I brought it up during the meeting.
He was kind of surprised by that, because he said he was on track on his overtime. I do have a response from the police chief.
Okay.
If you want to continue on until I can find it, because it's deeper in my emails.
Any other questions, Skip?
Well, I guess I will have to go back and pull out each and every one of the questions I had. So, but basically, I was just looking to see if we were going to be getting some answers because they were outstanding.
Yeah, I have a response from the police chief.
Okay.
The fire chief didn't really have one. Because you were talking about the regular payroll too? Because
Yeah.
I only thought overtime.
Yeah.
Okay. If you want to continue, I'll find it. In here somewhere.
Is there anything else? Is there a motion to accept the minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Me.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Tim, you gonna abstain?
No. But, you know, if you want me to, I will.
Okay, thank you. Well, you weren't here, so.
Oh, okay, I'll abstain then.
Chris? Okay. Any public comment? None? Changing of the calendar. The calendar has changed again, and I apologize for this. But Glenn had talked to me the day after, and the finance, appraisal, technology, legal and insurance benefits, and welfare administration have been moved to the 15th of November. The debt would have been the only thing, but we have moved that up till tonight, and we have moved the fire department up to the 25th. So those are the changes for the calendar year.
So just the fire department next week?
Correct. And the police department will be separate on the 1st. Correct. Okay. Mr. McDonough, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thanks. So tonight we're only gonna cover administration, boards and commissions, elected officials. We're gonna skip insurance and legal, correct? Because they're going to another date?
Correct.
Okay. And then debt service and default budget. I don't wanna just reread this since, I sent it out to everybody a couple days ago. All of these budgets are pretty straightforward. We'll start with the administration budget. There was an error of some type that Mr. Dunn can explain if necessary in the retirement costs in the 2018 budget. Because it was under budgeted, it appears that there's a significant increase of over $8,000 in this line item. Apparently, had there not been an error in 2018, this line item would actually have gone down due to a decrease in the employer contribution percentage, as outlined there. There was also a increase in insurance, which reflects the change of one of the employees to a family health plan instead of a less expensive plan. There was discussion about the, I'm not gonna get into that.
But I did the homework.
Okay. Skip, you wanna tell us about the homework? You were talking about RSA, it's about the legality of of associations, taxpayer funded, being used for lobbying efforts.
Yeah, this is something that somebody had said something on in an area that I listen to a lot, and I just happened to come to mind when we were talking about the New Hampshire Municipal Association dues. It's RSA 15.5. And I thought, well, geez, this is something that we need to pay attention to. I was unfamiliar with it. I had only remembered it in passing, so I looked it up, read through it. And basically, the long and short of it is, I'm not sure that it entirely works in this situation. It basically, in essence, what it's saying, if you receive state monies, you can't use that to fund organizations that lobby the government, which both the New Hampshire Municipal Association and the New Hampshire School Board Association do lobby for and about legislation. And this basically says that you have to compartmentalize the state funds altogether so that they are not commingled or intermingled. So that, well, could state funds go to these organizations which will then lobby the state for one thing or another. I'm not entirely sure that it applies in this particular case, so it's inconclusive from my standpoint, but I figured as long as I opened up my big yap and said that I would look it up, I'd look it up. And now I shall close said big yap.
Where does that leave us?
Paying a more expensive dues to the New Hampshire Municipal Association.
Okay.
So that they can lobby against us.
Yeah, philosophically, I don't think it's any big secret that I'm not in favor of giving money to organizations that then lobby against not all taxpayer interest, but some taxpayer interest. I don't think that we should, from a philosophical standpoint, do that. I should not have to pay to fund somebody that speaks against what I believe to be correct. Your mileage will vary.
Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, just my 2 cents on that. I mean, I don't disagree necessarily with what you're saying. I don't really see the need for lobbying efforts on their part. Unfortunately, they do it, and so do other associations that we taxpayers fund. But to me, as I opined last year, I think the benefits of these associations outweigh that negative. I can speak more from the School Board Association, but in this case, the town's version of that, they do provide significant benefits to the town administrator, to the town staff. Lots of seminars that they wouldn't be able to go to, and trainings they wouldn't be able to go to if they weren't members. Free legal counsel in some instances. So I think that there's a significant benefit to being involved in it, and it's unfortunate that the price tag is so high. But narrowly, I'm still in favor of being a member of it. But anyway, moving on, it's still about the municipal association. There's a estimated 10% increase in their dues because Scott does not have the final figure for their dues, so that line item is up $931. After some discussion, the subcommittee voted unanimously to recommend the budget as proposed. Do you want to take these one at a time for full board discussion, or do you want to go through the entire report and then come back to each of these one by
Let's
one?
do it one at a time.
So we're on administration.
We're on administration,
Administration.
and I think we'll let Mr. Dunn come up, and if anyone that wasn't a part of the subcommittee or can have questions.
Be happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead, Jack.
So we expect, based on the error on the retirement benefits for 18, that we're gonna go from this 18,559 that we've spent to date to something on the order of 26,000 by the end of the year. That's how it's gonna work?
It is a percentage of wages. It's tied to the wages.
Okay, so that's gonna go up still quite a bit as far as the variance goes before the end of the year? And then this 26 would have been down from that level? So we're actually gonna be higher in the actual in 18?
Trying to say, it's not entirely true that the number would go down. The rate is going down next July 1st. But the rates are tied to wages, which are increasing.
Okay. I was just trying to figure out if we under provisioned, if it's gonna show up at a massive under provision.
Well, I'm confident that the number right now in the selectmen's budget is the correct number, based on the percentages of the wages that are in the budget.
Chris? What Mr. Dunn just said then makes my report incorrect. He must not have understood the question that I asked him in the subcommittee meeting. And because it was stated that that line item would have gone down beside if it wasn't for that error. I think what he meant.
I did see
was
what
that
you
the-
read, and I realized right off the bat that that's not necessarily true, but I don't remember misleading anybody or.
Well, perhaps you were speaking of the rate going down.
The rate was definitely going down a little bit. Yep.
So in my report, I'd like to strike that line and change it to the rate went down, but not necessarily the real dollars.
Okay.
Certainly.
Go ahead.
Under contracted services, which ends in 216, I see you have budgeted $3,900 for boiled water. Is that something about the water that requires you to be boiled?
Yeah, the water that we have to this building is really not fit for consumption.
Really? Okay. Well, I didn't want.
And it's, it's another gray line, if you will. So the number, typically, because we test the water 4 times a year, and the number is high in MTBEs, because apparently there were leaking fuel tanks on the property at one point in time. And we've also recently discovered that the numbers are high in PFOAs, although they haven't reached the level of crossing the, what's called the MCL, maximum contamination level. We're just below that number for PFOAs. And PFOAs are a result of, at one point in time, the fire department was spreading, training with foam. And so that foam is where the PFOA chemicals have come from. And so we're monitoring it, it's close, it's not quite over. But for those, primarily for those 2 reasons, plus we don't treat for arsenic, as most folks know, the arsenic level is kind of fairly high here. We had a problem down in Glendale where we actually couldn't use that water, because of the arsenic level. So there's no real treatment system other than a softener. And, so for that reason, we don't drink the water. We've taken out all the bubblers here, and so that figure provides bottled water for all of the departments. We haven't broken it out on a department basis. So there are, throughout the buildings, including Public Works and the fire station, there are those dispensers that you see with the coolers that sit on top of it. And so that's what that money's for.
Thank you, that makes sense, thank you.
So, are we looking at any major project down the road to clean this up, or?
We are not.
Anything else? And I will entertain a motion
On this piece,
on this piece.
on the, I make a motion to accept the subcommittee's, report on the, administration portion of the budget.
So you're looking at the 289, 214?
Yes.
Okay,
We're looking for a motion for the actual.
For the actual amount.
budget, not for the subcommittee report.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The actual budget.
for the actual budget amount of 280,
284,
280, 289.
289, 214.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Nay,
One nay.
for obvious reasons.
Angela?
I didn't get the count, I'm sorry, for yes and no, for yea and
Okay,
nay.
for all those, please raise your hand.
For yes. Okay,
And one nay.
oh, that was it, I'm sorry.
I didn't get a second.
That was Tom.
Tom or Sue, whichever one.
Tom.
Okay, boards and commissions?
Boards and commissions.
As I stated in my report, the majority of this budget is for our friend Angela here to come and take notes of our meeting.
Well worth it.
A couple of small things, Historic District Committee, Joint Loss Management Committee, and Budget Committee.
Yeah, what did we
What
spend?
was that, 654 again?
That's for the budget committee members to attend, like the NHMA budget
Oh, that's right,
conference
that's
that we
right.
had recently,
Yeah.
and any other courses that might come up that folks are interested in.
And that'd be for like advertisements too, we have to post.
The other thing is, yep,
Okay.
the publishing of legal ads for hearing notices.
So the subcommittee had very little to offer for discussion on this, so it seemed so straightforward to us that we moved on with a unanimous recommendation.
Are there any questions? In hearing none, I will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept the, boards and committees, budget for $2,455.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Sue. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it.
Elected officials.
That's the first one, the first two. The white tab at the beginning.
There was one change to to this budget from last year, of any significance, and that was a stipend increase for the checklist supervisors. There's 3 of them. They would each receive an additional $150 for their work, from $600 to $750, and this is for work before and after the actual elections, and I believe they're paid hourly for their time on election day when they're in the voting facility. The number of hours, do you recall, about 40 hours?
40 hours before and 40 hours after.
Okay.
Total.
Before and after the election?
Before and after the election.
24.
What's that?
24.
12 and 12.
12 and 12.
12
Was
to
it
12.
24?
It was 24.
24 before and after?
And that's an approximation? Yeah. So there was actually a motion in the subcommittee level to remove that increase and level fund that line item. That motion did fail on a 4-to-1 vote. And after the motion failed, we proceeded to vote to approve the budget as proposed.
Any questions?
I'm sorry, I have a question. The wage and benefit projections that we have didn't have the current rates, they were just blank. So is the only one that changed the supervisor checklist?
It's on the pages.
No, on this, right here, this column?
So you're looking at the
Oh,
page
to the-
that's called wage and benefit projection.
Yes, the column that says current rate, on all the other
Yeah.
tabs, there's filled in on this tab that isn't. So is the only place that the current rate is changing the 3 supervisor checklists?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Jack.
So the hourly rate of $25 at the $600 stipend rate, 24 into 600, seems pretty darn competitive with a lot of the hourly rates for tasks that employees are doing for the town that are at least as demanding. I don't know why we would need to take it to 31. Can someone just explain that to me?
Well, I think Scott can elaborate, but there was discussion about it being year-round checklist maintenance that they had to do. And I don't remember the 24-hour thing before today, our discussion today.
I remember that number coming up. And the chairman of the supervisors of the checklist is here, and I'm sure she would rather not speak if she doesn't have to, but if you really want to drag her up here, she is here. So their obligations are all prescribed by state law, and throughout the course of the year, they have meetings for people to come in and register to vote, and they have meetings where they purge the checklist and update the checklist and download what takes place at an election into the Secretary of State's website. So they're paid $10 an hour when they're working on election day, next to election workers who are making $9.50 an hour, I think we're up to. So that covers them when they're sitting there. It's a 14-hour day coming up November 6th. That's a 14-hour day for them. And the stipend covers all of the other time that they put in. So over the course of the year, I don't know, Mary, if you might have a number for that, but it's several hundred hours. So the $750 probably works out to about $1 an hour.
So it's not just the 24 hours, the 12
Right,
hours.
right. There's time spent before the election doing preparation work. There's time spent after election doing reporting and things like that. And then there are other meetings held throughout the course of the year. So it's, like I said, it's probably in the $1, $2 an hour range at that $750 stipend level.
I think one of the things that came up in that meeting was there's a level of expertise that we want to make sure we maintain, and we don't want to not pay them a little bit extra for that level of expertise to get a job done that needs to get done and done right in this day and age. So I think they do a good job. So I think we.
So clearly part of the motivation in increasing the stipend was to retain the supervisors we have.
Sue, did you have a question?
I didn't have a question, I had a comment. For many years, this was a volunteer group that did this work, and I'm not disparaged in the work they do, or suggesting that they don't do a good job. They certainly do. It just seems to me that the $600 is certainly adequate enough, especially in view of the fact that they're getting paid, more on election days. This body here works very hard. None of us get paid. I don't think any of us expect to be paid or want to be paid. With our expanded number of meetings that we are having starting last year, I think we put in a significant number of hours doing the people's work here. And so I would not support the raise. I don't think it's necessary.
I mean, I think that some members of the committee would feel more comfortable hearing from one of the supervisors of the checklist what their actual annual estimate of hours is. And
Come on up, Mary.
Come on up, Mary. Or,
And also, I wouldn't mind addressing, because Mary hasn't been there very long, the historical events that have come with supervisor's checklist job and how much that's evolved, if that would help the board at all.
I just think that it's,
come on
Do
up.
you wanna go ahead first, Mary? No, I'll back you up.
I just think that to hear that it is a lot of hours as opposed to some arbitrary
It is a lot of
24
hours.
hours thinking you're making $25 an hour. If that's not the case, we want to hear about it.
I would dare say with each election, we at least spend, I would say 20 hours before an election, and often 15 to 20 after an election. Yes, we are paid to sit at the polls, but that's the least of our work.
Mm-hmm.
It's the before and the after work. And this position is really tough to fill and get good qualified people. And I understand that you folks are not compensated for what you do. But we really, really need to keep experienced people in this position. Sometimes there's not much time to train. And so the easier it is for us is with someone that stays with the position for a while. When I first started this, I couldn't believe that they asked for a 6-year term for this position. And now I understand why they do. Because it's tough to get all of what you need to know and implement it properly, fast. Go ahead.
So just to sum it up, so about 20 hours before, 24 hours, 20 hours after, it's 40 hours each election. And is there there were some meetings and stuff and some other stuff throughout the year?
Yeah, that's just the election.
Okay.
But ongoing throughout the year, there are mandated meetings by the state, and then there are prudent meetings by the committee, because we have to maintain our rolls of voters.
Yeah.
We have to add to and take from so that you have an accurate voter checklist. And that is done all year long. This is not just an election thing that we do.
Yeah, can you just explain to us, because some of us don't know, including myself, what are the skill tasks that someone else couldn't come in and determine whether or not they're the right person to be on the list? I just don't know.
You need to be educated enough to be able to read a manual. That sounds pretty inane, but you do. You guys have bookwork. You need to be able to decipher it. We have a manual. I didn't bring it tonight, but we have a thick manual, and then we have thicker RSAs. And we are the first and the last person to deal with a voter. It is our responsibility to make sure we understand all of the rules and regulations, who can register, who cannot register, what are the qualifications for registering. And a lot of what we are all about is the registration process so that we have qualified voters in a town. And you need to be able to use a computer. In this day and age, maybe years ago you didn't, but now you do. And you need to be able to understand dialogue between the Secretary of State's office and what you're doing. You need to be able to process it and bring it to a correct end. it's just not a particularly simple job. It's not something where you can just be a pencil pusher. We're not paid to push the pencil. We're paid to understand the rules and the regulations, to make sure it happens appropriately when someone walks up to register to vote at the election, or when someone registers in the town clerk's office and then we get the app. I just pulled a bunch of apps out of our box, and one of my coworkers just pulled a bunch out yesterday or day before. And we have to process all that, and it has to be done in a timely manner. I'm not sure what else I can
Well, thanks.
say.
Right.
How often do you have to, how often do the regulations and the RSAs change so that you have to get updates through training in a given year?
Usually the big changes are once a year, but if the Secretary of State goes through and makes some change, then we get it via email almost immediately, and then we have to know that change, understand it, and be able to implement it.
Anything else?
On these, this year, well, actually, it won't fall this year. Yes, it will, because we had a spring vote, and we'll have, so we're gonna have two. Do you ever have, we don't ever have?
Well, we have 3 this year.
3.
And then next year,
Oh, right, primary, right.
yeah, we have 3 this year.
Yeah.
The November one coming up. Next year is light.
Yeah.
The following year
Heavy.
is heavy. And particularly when we come up against a presidential election, we can get 300 new voters, all of which we, at the polls, not talking about what we get before the polls, that come in to register, and we have to make sure they're registered properly. And those voters that come in on election day, we take the applications and make sure they're correct. The voters meet all the qualifications. And then tons of process time afterwards into the state's electronic system.
Another question, do you deal with absentee voters, or is that a different group that?
The town clerk deals with absentee voters for the most part, but we do have to make sure they are in the system correctly. Particularly if they're new.
Right.
New voter.
And an absentee ballot is separate than absentee voter.
Yeah.
I don't know which question you're asking about.
Okay.
They do the
ballot.
absentee ballots, but
Ann would do absentee voters, and then we
Yeah.
give her the
Right,
paperwork.
so if somebody moved to Europe for an extended period of time
If they're
that wanted to
overseas,
vote,
that's
you would
different.
get involved to qualify them for absentee status.
FGCA,
yeah.
Federal Plus got an application.
And of course, all the absentees, after all these people come in and vote, then we
Check.
almost immediately have to process all of this, have to make sure that our numbers as supervisors of the checklist match the town clerk's numbers of actual voters that come in to vote, that the absentee voter count matches.
A lot of reconciliation.
It's a lot of work.
And then when somebody comes in to vote on voter day and register on the day of voting, do you have to do some work after to check that person out as well?
We make sure on
Because you can't
paper
check, yeah.
that it looks correct.
Right, but you have to
So
check
they
it
can
afterwards.
vote.
Right,
We're not to refuse a voter.
right.
The right to
Check
vote.
it afterwards, right?
But we will go through everything, if we have our computer with us at the polls, then we could, if the new applicant load is light enough to allow us time to go into the computer, we could work on it that way. But, yes, we do have to do follow-up with every voter.
Chris? thank you for coming tonight.
Absolutely.
Thank you for doing the job that you do, and thanks for educating us on what you do. It's worth your visit tonight. I'd like to make a motion that we accept the elected officials' budget as proposed.
I second that.
Okay, there's any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it.
What's the vote?
10-1.
10-1.
Next, we go to debt service. Green tab, way towards the back.
Way back.
Thank you.
The second page on the tab, you see a breakdown of the various bonds and lease schedules. We don't really have a lot of say in this budget. This is more just a statement of what the town owes and its expected principal and interest payments. The budget does show a decrease of $21,283, and that is substantially due to the fact that the radio equipment bond is being retired. So, yeah, just in time to get a
new one.
So the subcommittee recommended passing of this proposed budget.
Any questions? Is there a motion?
I make a motion that we accept the debt service as shown.
Is there a second?
Sure.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Okay, my final budget for the evening is the default budget.
Well, actually, there's one more after that.
Is there?
Well, it's the other government one, correct, Scott?
We do that?
It's not in my
What
report.
about insurance?
What about
and-
insurance?
Insurance will be done on the 15th of November. That's a Glenn thing.
Okay, I
Thank
just saw that it said the subcommittee.
I mean, the other government's just the elephant in the room.
So on the default budget, for those of you who didn't have the privilege of being here the last couple of years, there's an RSA that discusses what can and cannot be in the default budget. The town takes a ultra-conservative approach to it, and in my opinion, has a smaller default budget than they should have. Luckily, they've never had to operate under a default budget in Scott's term anyway, and my term for sure. So the default budget is $12,957,875. The proposed operating budget without changes will be $13,802 and change. So if the proposed budget that we send to the voters does not pass, the town has to operate on the default budget, which will be some $845,000 less than what we sent to the voters. In which case there are several bargaining units that will have increases mandated by contract that the town will have to fulfill, and they will not have budgeted for it. That's the big one as far as I'm concerned. But again, as I noted in here, that's a select board decision. It's not, we don't have anything to say. I just wanted to air that out. So what would happen is they would fund that mandate and they would take the money out of probably Department of Public Works and pave less roads. So I don't really have anything to add. If anyone has questions on how this works, Mr. Dunn can answer them.
Are there any questions? There are none? We don't vote on this one, correct?
It's a selectmen's issue.
Yep.
The selectmen can change this number right up to the day they sign the warrant.
Okay. done now. Just one last one, which would be the other government, the yellow tab, which is just basically our payment for the city of Laconia for the business park.
Must we?
Unfortunately,
Every year I go,
Other
we should
governments?
never have
Yes,
done
it's the
this.
yellow, it's the yellow tab. It's unfortunately something we have to do, Skip. I am on your corner on this one, but
They wanted it when we adopted
Who they?
it.
They. Yeah.
Our realtors and other business firms.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
What drives the rate of increase from year to year?
Scott?
Basically.
Basically, we'll go.
So the obligation comes from what's called an intermunicipal agreement that was approved by the voters in 2001. And so it's essentially, in this particular line item for $20,000, it's a tax sharing formula based on the values of properties in the Lakes Business Park, less the costs of road maintenance and that's the big thing, is road maintenance. There's a formula that's prescribed in the intermunicipal agreement, and the finance director manages that. And so our obligation is to share with the city of Laconia a portion of that extra revenue that we get from the valuation of properties in the Lakes Business Park.
Thank you.
We only get the valuation of properties in Guilford though.
Correct. And that's the piece that we share with Laconia as well. So it's actually, and technically, the business park I'm referring to is Lakes Business Park 2. Lakes Business Park 1 is entirely in the city of Laconia, and the town of Guilford is not part of that project. The intermunicipal agreement doesn't cover that phase of the business park. Strictly phase 2, which is the part that's in Guilford, which the town of Guilford owns 17.8% of the real estate, and the city of Laconia owns the other 82.8%.
So I might get, not fully understand. So we bill for taxes on the appraised value of those business properties. No value assigned to the ongoing business. It's just the physical plant that the
Well,
business.
it's like any other property tax, so it's based on the ad valorem value of the real estate, whatever improvements.
So we take that in, and then we give
We have to share. a portion
20
of that.
grand
Yeah.
is their sharing part, okay.
And, you know, quite frankly, we come out ahead on that deal, but if it wasn't for the agreement, we would keep 100% of it instead of having to send 20 grand back to Laconia.
Can you share with us just what we keep? How much, is it like 40 grand or 60 grand?
I have not recently done the addition on
Yeah,
what
I'm
the
just
values
curious.
are, but, you know, there are several multi-million-dollar properties in the business park. The other piece that you'll be voting on as well is, again, in accordance with the terms of the intermunicipal agreement, we have to put $58,000 a year into a trust fund for the infrastructure of the park. And that seems to go on into perpetuity as well.
Selectman Brennan.
How much money is in that fund, Scott?
I think you have that figure in your book somewhere. In the capital budget, I think there's a breakdown of the various funds.
Capital outlay.
Flip that
Next
page
tab,
up.
this one.
Taking up, keep going, there we go, here. So
called
Lakes, Business Park Trust Fund, $536,000. Going considerably.
Exactly.
That's a lot of money, and I don't see an end to our putting in that $58,000 until such time as the town may get out of the intermunicipal agreement. It's possible, I'm not sure if there's a language in there that when the park is fully developed, whether that needs to continue or not, I don't know off the top of my head.
Well, I know, my understanding is once it's enough property's been sold, there's gonna be a walking trail and a park and all this other stuff that 500,000 gonna go to, but the lots aren't exactly selling at a high rate.
No, but they are,
Never.
selling right now, they're
I
selling
know,
much
it's just
quicker than they
unexpected.
have in the time that I've been here. I think this year we will have sold, 3 or 4 lots this year.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Wow, I am still not
Things
impressed.
are really building in the last couple of months, Tom.
Right.
How many are there left? You say you sold
I
3,
think
but
there's about 7 lots left.
about 7, okay. I was trying to get a rough idea.
Go ahead. So who plows that road?
The
Is it-
town of Guilford plows the portion in Guilford,
Okay,
Council Ave.
okay, so it's, although we.
Yep. So those costs, come out of the tax sharing formula.
And so if, that bridge needs to be replaced by across from Pichet,
We
so
will,
that.
I think we'll have, funds to do that. And if the road
No,
needs to
but-
be repaved, you know, we will pay for it out of the trust fund and not out of our road improvement fund.
So it's like a condo association, if, not a condo association, if our road, we pave our road, our side of the road, which Laconia owns, you said 78% of the lots in on our town of Guilford, is that what you said?
Yes, yep.
So, we paved the road, I'm just trying to.
So it's my understanding that the land was originally purchased by both communities for a, land. And then, this park concept evolved out of that, again, before my time.
Do we have control over the funds, or does the county?
The funds are under the control of the Guilford trustees of trust funds.
Okay.
And so for money to come out of those funds, it takes a vote of the Lakes Business Park Board of Directors, which consists of 3 citizens from Guilford and 3 citizens from Laconia. And then from there, it requires the approval of the Laconia City Council and the Guilford Board of Select.
Tim? Since we're discussing the maintenance fund for that particular place, I would just point out, there's a very huge, large dead pine tree, about 150 yards down the road, and, you know, it's probably a 60% chance it's gonna fall in the woods, but the last couple of years, the lean has been getting more noticeable. It's definitely gonna go over in the next couple of years. And if it goes onto the guardrail, you know, there's gonna be a couple $1,000s worth of damage that could possibly be, you know, ameliorated if that tree was given some notice and dealt with before it falls on.
So we would only assume responsibility for the tree if it's located within the town right of way. It's outside
Well,
the
it's
town.
very large, so it's not likely to be
So
in
if
the
it was
town
on
right
one-
away, but when
right,
it
so if it was
falls,
on one
it
of the
certainly
lots.
will be.
So if it's outside the town right away, then it's either on a
Somebody-
lot that somebody has purchased, or it's on a lot that hasn't been sold yet, in which case we own 17.8% of that.
Well, it just seems pigheaded not to address that issue and then have that guardrail
We
damage.
will not cut a tree that's not in the right of way. We're not gonna spend taxpayer dollars, we're prohibited by law.
We'll spend $2,000 to fix the guardrail.
Well,
Well, we got $500,000 in the account.
there are alternatives. If it's in the town right of way, it's our responsibility.
I'm sure Scott will.
It's on
look into
private
it,
land.
The DPW director, from Scott.
I will look into that.
Thank you, sir.
You know, what fills the capital reserve fund? What are the functions of filling that? Is that when a property is sold?
$58,000 a year.
Really? That's
It
it?
comes from the town of Guilford.
That, yeah, it has to be other funds than that. If a lot is sold?
No, it's, again, it's tied to the tax revenue we receive from the development of properties in the park, so you can think of it as somewhat of a TIF, tax increment financing district, only it's not set up as a TIF. Under the terms of the intermunicipal agreement, the town's obligated to put $58,000 a year from those tax funds into that trust fund.
58,000, okay.
We've just been doing it a long time.
Chris? Can we move on?
please.
Well, I will accept the motion for the 20,000. Yeah.
I don't know how to say it, but I'll,
Are we even on that one?
Well, it is other governments, and then you're done. Jack, go ahead.
what's the verbiage I need to use?
Just say you will accept, you'll make a motion to accept.
So I make a motion to accept the Board of Selectmen's budget or recommendation for $20,000.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Chris. All in favor say, any discussions first? Hear none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. One nay. The ayes have it. And the administration part is done.
Why do we actually, just curious, why do we bring this up in a meeting like this? Doesn't that contractual agreement preclude us from making any adjustments?
It's still an appropriation
It's
of
not
money, which
appropriation.
puts it into our ballpark.
And I will turn it over to Sue.
Okay, on Monday, October 15th, Tim, myself, Kristen, and Joe met with Denise, the town clerk, and we went over her budget in detail. The budget is up 0.01%, which is less than last year. And full-time and part-time wages have increased based on proposed merit increases that will take place. The contracted services have decreased by 13%, primarily because legal research on liens have decreased.
So, quick question.
Yep.
Is it because we have less liens being applied, or the cost of doing that research has gone down?
Well, apparently there are fewer liens to research because fewer foreclosures. Yep, go right ahead.
You want to finish your report first, or what? I didn't want to interrupt you.
No, by all means.
It's a combination of a couple things. Contracted services for this lien research used to come out of the Board of Selectmen's budget, and a couple of years ago we took a guesstimated amount and moved it into my line item, and so I've watched that for the last couple of years and haven't spent it. So, and I think we are in really good shape as far as our back taxes go. So, I thought it would be a good year to try to decrease and have some savings.
Okay, software. Last year, the town clerk's office purchased new software, and it turns out to be much more efficient than what they had before. And the new system is working out much better. And also, printing fees seem to be stable. They haven't gone up, so that's good. The postage line has changed because when this was these pages were put in our book, there had been no announcement of a postage increase, which is going to come in January. So that line has to be adjusted. Denise was going to look into what she thought was a good amount to put into the budget. So did you find?
I looked at it, and still I think with what my expenditures were over the last 2 years,
Yeah.
and I've looked at sending the tax bills out because we don't want to not be able to send those out. 5-cent increase. I looked at past history, and I think I'm still okay, Sue, with leaving it as submitted originally.
Okay. So that's good.
Can I interrupt real quick for a second? Why is there a difference between this sheet and this sheet? Like the cover summary shows an overall decrease of 0.21%, whereas Sue's talking about an increase of 0.1%.
the overall.
Is the 393,003 the correct budget?
Let me see the,
My budget
I
was.
think mine.
Yep, it's down $828 a month.
So, yeah, what
Well,
is?
I guess, Scott, the reason the question was asked is because on ours, I'm looking at, on the line, it says 393,882, then had to be your handwriting that says 394,233.
But then this one says even less than that.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're looking at, 'cause mine
I'll take the highest amount.
You got this.
yeah.
I have written
Oh,
down
yeah, don't go by that.
230.
That's not
Realizing
what
that an
I
option
That's go
right
by
now.
the,
Yes,
So the numbers on
So
the.
this
yeah,
is-
there it is. On the last page.
that's just Denise mucking up the work.
Something
You're
that
saying
this
This one
cover
is
sheet
skipping
or
up,
something
skipping something I should have filled
are
in.
using pages in this book,
You-
so I think
okay,
it's
yeah.
very
So
Cover
the,
sheet is the
difficult to follow
correct
this
sheet,
year.
is that what you
Yeah,
said?
correct,
Scott?
yeah.
Thank
so the
you.
postage is still gonna remain at,
14,500.
14,500.
So the line, the overall budget is up 0.1%. It should actually say the overall budget is down 0.21%.
Sorry, I didn't get a chance to review that either, so.
If you take that $600.
I gotta see that.
Yeah, the $600 is in on the cover.
This would be this sort of spreadsheet.
You don't need to add it.
So it's 393.
We weren't sure at the meeting.
003. I'm reading this report and I'm looking at this, I'm like, am I in the wrong department here?
I ask myself that a lot. No, and I didn't have a chance to review this either, I had a family emergency this afternoon, so. Not totally.
Okay, so elections and registration,
You wanna finish this up?
What?
So
We
you
wanna
wanna
take-
vote on-
Yeah, let's take a vote first. And go ahead, Chris.
So, one of the things that we discussed was that there would be a change in, personnel in your department, and it's not listed here, I don't know if it's something that
It's,
needs to be
we
discussed.
will not talk about that
Yeah, no,
tonight.
there's no change at this point.
Okay, thank you,
No.
thank you, I understand.
okay. So we'll vote on this number here, of 393,003.
Is that right, or is it gonna be 394, 230?
No,
No,
393,003.
Okay.
So I would,
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we approve the town clerk tax collector proposed budget of $393,003.
Is there a
Second.
second? Second by Jack. Any discussion? In hearing none. Oh, go ahead, Peter.
What, I didn't
No.
understand. Why?
It's a personnel issue. It's a
issue.
personnel issue, and it,
We may have some changes coming,
but it has
And
not been
merits
brought
may
to the Board of
change.
Selectmen yet, so.
yeah, we're in
Okay,
the
but it's not
process.
head count it's not a head count number, okay.
No.
Oh, well, okay, I understand why it's
We
no,
maybe have,
okay.
we have a vacancy.
I just was wondering, there was a head count change and we were adding to the department or this?
No.
Okay, all right, good enough.
Okay, all
okay.
those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Okay,
Open registrations.
elections and registrations, we went over this budget and, couldn't find too much that, we needed to, change. The contracted services line is being increased by $50 because the service contract for the voting machines has increased. We did note that. And in this year, there's only one town election in 2019. So the election figure is way down. That's why the big drop.
This
No.
budget doesn't show a $50 increase
Yeah,
in
that doesn't show the
contracted
50,
services.
so do we have to make the $50 increase?
I think I'm fine without it, so
Okay, so,
we're gonna talk about it.
okay,
I'll
so,
get by without it.
all right,
Okay.
so then we'll leave it.
Thank you.
Why the significant decrease in printing?
This is on the.
One
Oh, that's
election.
election.
One election.
And if we do happen to have a special election, so sometimes we don't know if we're gonna lose, a voting, you know, like a state rep. It happened in the city of Laconia recently, and you have to have a special election. Anytime we have to have a special election, most of the stuff is provided by the Secretary of State's office. If we happen to have a petition article that we have to have a special election on, it's usually a yes/no vote. I wouldn't program the machines, I would have a paper, so I can cut down the cost on a special election, if one would come up.
Okay.
So, the total,
Skip.
Just a quick question, since the machines were brought up. How old is our current optical reader? And are there any plans on replacing it?
We did bring that up at the meeting. So I think the Secretary of State's office is going to be looking at something. They are old. We have the first machines that were out, because the clerks in the Lakes region were the ones that were bringing it forward to the legislature. My predecessor was a big proponent of that. So, but all the machines are the same, they're old, they're antiquated, and so the maintenance fee is coming up because of that.
Yep.
But I think the Secretary of State's office they're looking at something, they know that we're on a, you know, it's very limited how much time we're gonna have on these. We do test them every single election, and I wanna make it clear that we don't have any Wi-Fi, there is nothing to hack into. The state of New Hampshire has everything papered, and it's as secure as you can be. The supervisors of the checklist do have to maintain a statewide voter checklist, and we didn't used to have to do that. We had sort of an Excel spreadsheet on a local database. Now we're part of the whole statewide thing, and these laws change every time the legislature meets. I can tell you that. I was past president of the Town Clerks Association. The year I was president, which is about 4 years ago, I tracked 100 pieces of legislation to do with voting. So do we have changes? We have changes like the wind blows. I mean, every time they meet, it's a lot.
Question back on the machine. Are we going to stay with a standalone optical reader?
That'll be up
Which I
to-
think is much more secure than,
That'll be up to the Secretary of State. They
Okay.
govern what we use.
Okay.
There's no option. We all use the same machine.
okay.
When was the last time you had to do a recount?
Well, recount, let's see, last close vote. It's been a while.
Fire truck special election?
Yeah, that probably would be it.
Yeah.
So what, yeah, 7 years ago, 6 years ago?
Do you recall what the variance was in the manual count as opposed to the readers?
I don't think there was a change in the outcome. I think it was, I can tell you, yeah, and we test those machines, both of them, so we have, each machine comes with 2 chips. We have a backup chip, and we have a, voting chip in the machine. We, test the machine, we put 50 ballots in 4 different ways, each chip. So it's, several hours in the afternoon that the moderator and we do it publicly. We count the ballots and we test the machine, and I have never had it not be accurate. I've been in the office 31 years. I think we've probably had the machines, I'm gonna guess, 25. So I have a lot of confidence in them. More confidence in the machine than my eyes in counting at that time of night after a 14-hour day.
Is there a motion on the floor?
Yeah, the motion is to accept the elections and registration budget as proposed.
By the Board of
And that
Selectmen?
is, by the Board of Selectmen, that number is $12,894.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Kristen. Any discussion? And hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. 2 nays. Thank you,
Thank you
Denise.
very much.
Thank you, Denise.
Thank you.
And now, who's going to do Parks and Rec?
I got Parks and Rec. Obviously, you can see who has the worst eyesight here. Bless you. Nice size 14 font on this. We met with Herb the other night, and as you can see, I don't need to read this whole thing, but an increase in seasonal staffing due to increase in wages to try to get the lifeguards. They had issue getting staffing this past year. Reimbursement for WSI, water safety inspection training. That was something that, I'm not sure if you said they've done that in the past, but they're trying to do it more, and they also are not giving them the reimbursement right away. They wait until the end of the season, which is good, so they don't get reimbursed and then leave. Good part of the discussion we had was on increase in Herb's budget, where the Board of Selectmen cut $1,372, and that was on patrol, since a new thing that they've started at the beach is 3 weeks before Memorial Day, the official opening, and 3 weeks after Labor Day, the official closing. They have patrols going through.
Joe,
yeah.
just to clarify, it's 3 weeks before we open, which that 3 weeks starts Memorial Day weekend.
Yes, okay.
Not 3 weeks prior to Memorial
Oh,
Day.
okay, sorry. Did I write 3 weeks before Memorial Day on
I don't
that?
know, that's how you just said it
For
though.
3 weekends before the official opening, so that is incorrect.
Starting Memorial Day.
Yes, thank you. And Herb had stated the staff didn't feel comfortable, like having one staff member on patrol walking around to go up to some people and tell them they're violating a rule. And that's why they wanted 2 staff members there. We also had a motion to add the $700, add $700 back into the budget to help pay for part of that staffing, and the motion failed 2-1. What else? The professional development. Herb didn't attend the conference last year, but he's attending it this year, so it looks like there's a big increase. The $5,000 increase for Old Home Day, and the rationale was to maybe boost the fireworks and help with increasing participation in the parade. And I just put in there something that I wasn't aware of. The Old Home Day Committee spends about $33,000 on Old Home Day, with $11,000 in the budget. The rest is all through fundraising. And I'm not sure if I missed anything, or...
Just to clarify, the 5,000 isn't intended to be an annual appropriation. This coming summer is the 100th Old Home Day, so it's a special
Yes.
one-time plan to kind of boost for that event.
And that was something that the Board of Selectmen had agreed, and we agreed with that as well, being the 100th year. And
We also discussed the feasibility of having at least one police radio down at the beach for the staff to use. Again, we have people who come, and for whatever reason, that they tell them once, and then they tell them twice, and then sometimes they get ugly and they start giving people lip. I think that we raised the issue that some people who are in the skeleton staff sometimes feel that their personal safety isn't always as optimum as it could be.
Skip.
Based on that, do we have extra radio available for that purpose? Or if
Yes.
not, right,
yes,
we do?
We have a plan in the works to do that.
Okay.
okay.
With with an additional expenditure, or?
No, because the PD's replacing some of the radios, so we're gonna take an old radio.
That was the next question I was gonna ask. Are they interoperable?
We plan to make it.
Okay.
So,
Where is the national conference this year, and what's the duration?
For next year, it's planned to be in Baltimore. It's usually roughly a 4-day conference, usually a day travel, possibly on either end. I think it actually works out to be 3.5. So usually it's a fly out on a Monday morning, fly back on a Friday afternoon. So it's usually 4 nights over at the location.
And is that an every other year
That's
plan?
the way the Board of Selectmen is currently recommending for department heads, I believe.
Not every year, but every other year.
So it went down last year, went back, or for 2018, proposed to go back up for 2019, and then we'll probably see a decrease the following year again.
Did the concession stand open this summer?
Yes, it was open throughout the summer.
They're not coming back.
They are, yes.
Good.
Any questions? Is there a motion on the floor then? Give it.
I make a motion to accept the Board of Selectmen's budget of $256,805.
Is there a second?
I second that.
Seconded by Joe. Any other discussion? Go ahead.
I just want to make a statement. We had a very good and thorough discussion with Herb, and we appreciate your diligence in what you do, knowing the details, and we had all our questions answered very well. Thank you.
Any other? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? The ayes have it.
Okay, the skating rink, we spent more discussion on painting parts of it, and how that gets done. We overwhelmingly approved the budget for the skating rink. And we did get into some discussion, which wasn't part of it, but the capital improvement fund, Lincoln Park, but I know that's not part of this budget here. We didn't get into that discussion, I just thought I'd throw that in there.
Yep.
Joe, you mentioned painting. Is this in referral to painting the roof of the skating rink?
We just discussed what it looked like about, because someone had made the comment about is that structural damage, and it was inspected, and it's not structural damage, it's just
Rust.
surface rust and stuff like that. So it was just what has been done in the past, and, the seasonal employees had done up to a certain height. We just talked about what it looked like up there and what would need to be done.
Yeah, because I remember this being talked about before in the past, and the question had been brought up whether or not to appropriate funds out of the Parks and Rec Trust Fund to be able to pay for that. Because, again, that fund had gotten very, very large. We bought a truck off of it, and there's still quite a bit left.
Yeah.
So I didn't know whether...
We have plans for that.
Yeah, there's.
You have plans for that. What kind of
Yeah.
plans?
Playground.
Okay. So nothing out of that fund for the upkeep of the skating rink? To make sure that the roof stays up there and looks good without flaking down on the skaters.
So the answer is no.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a small discussion about the lighting as well. Sometimes they don't replace lighting if it's only de minimis amounts of bulbs out, but there's going to probably need to be a addressing near term of the lighting itself being obsolescent, and whether or not they'll need to put in a new, more modern lighting fixtures for that skating rink. Not now, but again, we'll be looking at that down the road probably. Like all through town, we've been replacing lighting with it, which has become obsolescent. And usually it's the light bulbs themselves, either they become very expensive or hard to get.
Anything else?
We discussed the Lincoln Park, and just to understand where those funds were gonna come from, I believe some of it, could you explain that again?
Yeah, it's not
Am I
related to
just-
Not for tonight.
it's not related to the ice rink. Do
Oh, no, okay, I'm sorry.
you want me to comment on it though? or-
Yeah, you had mentioned that.
Yeah.
I would like you to do
Just
that because,
Briefly,
Skip
and
had
it's,
mentioned
well, it's separate
what's
from the,
speaking of.
I think Skip was referring to the Recreation Revolving Fund, which
Correct.
is not the capital fund, and it's not tax dollars, that's user fees for program-based stuff is the revolving fund.
That is correct.
And through RSA, we're restricted on what we can expend those funds on. It has to be program-related expenses or things that support programs. As far as Lincoln Park goes, and Scott can correct me if I'm wrong, but we're looking at addressing that project through the Recreation Facilities Capital Fund. We're having issues with the retaining wall between sort of the middle level and the lower level has been deteriorating over the years. We actually had a blowout this year. DPW was able to kind of do a temporary fix, but that's an issue that needs to be addressed, both for safety of patrons, but also to make sure we don't run into serious erosion issues there. At the same time, we're looking to potentially redo the stairs going down to make those more safe and to sort of normal code as far as stairs go. But that project's planned to be funded through the Rec Facilities Capital Reserve Fund, and there will be a warrant article to put additional funds into that fund this vote. Does that answer that question?
Yes, yeah, I just wanted to understand where, that was, we had talked about that.
Okay.
Anything else, Chris?
Motion to approve the ice skating.
As recommended by the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah, at $9,368.
Is there a second?
Second that.
Seconded by Joe. Any other discussion? And hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. For those that came up, thank you. There's been no public comment, because there's no members of the public here. Is there anything from the Budget Committee?
We have a meeting. Will you call the meeting for
Next Thursday.
I don't have my,
It's not my budget.
so it's Thursday at 4:30.
4:30.
Okay.
That's the police subcommittee?
That's
Okay. I'm gonna double check.
Oh, yeah.
I have it on my school calendar. I don't have it.
Oh, you know,
If I had my
Skip.
When would we be having the next fiscal oversight meeting? Have you thought about that?
This is this school.
Let me think about that, and I'll get back to you next meeting.
Yeah, you said
Okay.
anytime that during the budget season, I'm gonna resign.
Is there a motion to adjourn? No, Rex, go ahead, sir.
I want to address Skip's question on the overtime.
Oh, sure.
The fire chief didn't get into details. He just said that his overtime request for next year is going down 0.5% because he's not using it. So I can't speak to the overtime. He can't be using the overtime that much if he's reducing the amount he's requesting.
Okay.
For the police chief, it says per your request, here's a non-exhaustive and in no particular order list of work obligations that resulted in overtime, some of which were unanticipated or over. It's rather lengthy. Shift coverages for full and partial shifts, contractual obligations for required court appearance, call-outs for detectives, the K-9 traffic accident reconstruction, early call-ins, mandatory department trainings, special town event coverage, Old Home Day, Halloween, Memorial Day Parade, National Night Out. Police standards and training, required research trainings, instructor presentations, trainings internally and externally for firearms, Alice, which is active shooter, the new stop sticks, court cases preparation, hiring and the recruitment process, change in allowable compensatory time accrual. For sergeants and administration staff, the Board of Selectmen in July 2018 reduced the allowable accrual of comp time hours from 40 to 16. Therefore, anything over 16 must be paid as overtime.
Okay.
That's what he said.
All right. Well, I thank you for that. Although I remember the page, I can't remember the numbers. My concern at the time was more of a case of that the expenditures seemed to be outstripping the calendar, and the operative question was more of a case of, are they going to get to the end of the year without going over budget? And I mean, that's part of it. I'll go back and take a look at the other questions.
I just, I know we're gonna hire 2 new police officers. We've only hired 1 so far. Is that correct, or?
Yes. We're struggling.
Pardon me?
We're struggling.
Oh, yeah, I mean, so, my question is there any anticipation that some of this overtime would be mitigated, if we get the 2 officers, on duty and,
The
working?
problem is anytime we hire a new person, there's the background investigation, and then they go to the police academy and their shift has to be covered. So, until they actually get on board and on duty, you know, through the academy, it doesn't help.
Anything else?
So we're basically paying them though, full-time, while they're training? Is that how it
Yes.
goes?
Yeah, when they're at the academy, it's 16 weeks now. And if you read anything about Bristol, there's a lawsuit going on there where an officer wanted to be paid for every second he was down there, day and night, 24/7 for 16 weeks.
Well, there you go.
Fortunately, most officers recognize they're getting an education and it benefits them. And they accept that they get up at 3 in the morning to do physical training and stuff like that. Comes with the territory.
Anything else? Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded.
Sure.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.
Croc TV.